Hey guys, I'm John Setzler. Welcome back to Atlanta Grill Company. Today we are going to cook a smoked chuck roast and it's going to be amazing, so let's get started. First thing I want to do in this chuck roast project is get my marinade started. So I've got here about 2 cloves of finely minced garlic that I've run through my microplane grater. I've got about a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, and we're going to add about 2 tablespoons or so of Dijon mustard. And I've got a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar. I've got a 1/2 cup of soy sauce. I've got about a 1/4 cup of olive oil. I've got a tablespoon of sugar, 2 teaspoons of onion powder, about a teaspoon of freshly cracked black pepper, 2 teaspoons of dried thyme, and that's probably about where I'm going to finish that up. I'm just going to take my whisk and whisk all that together and get it mixed up where I don't have any lumps of anything, and then we'll set that aside for just a few minutes. So I've got my chuck roast. I've had this guy in my freezer, luckily, because chuck roast has gotten kind of expensive here lately. So we're going to take that roast. This is about almost a 3-pounder, and I'm going to put it in my vacuum seal bag and stuff it all the way down to the bottom there. And then I'm going to dump in our marinade, and I want to make sure I get all that in there. And then I'm just going to take this guy, I'm going to vacuum seal that, and we're going to put that in the refrigerator. You want to go at least 8 hours, but we're just going to go overnight, so we will see you in the morning. We're ready to start cooking, so I've lit a fire in the firebox of my Kamado Joe Classic 3, and I'm going to put on a couple of pieces of post oak here to get a little bit of smoke going for this cook. And I'm going to set up the slow roller, and then I'm going to set my drip pan in place. I like to use a drip pan sometimes, and I've just cleaned up my slow roller, so we're going to use the drip pan today. And then I'm just going to close the lid on the grill. And then I'm going to use the Flame Boss 500 to set my pit to run. I think I'm going to run the first part of this cook at about 225. So I'll just let the Flame Boss park here at 225. And then I'll slightly crack open the top vent of the grill. And we're going to let this grill preheat for about 30 minutes or so before we put our chuck roast on. While our grill's coming up to temperature, I've gone ahead and taken this chuck roast out of the marinade. But the marinade that I had in my bag, I have saved that because that's coming back to this cook a little bit later. So let's go ahead and get this on the grill. Our Kamado Joe is cruising along right at 225, and I've got a nice thin smoke roll in here. So I'm going to set that chuck roast right in the middle there, right over the top of my grill pan, or my drip pan. And I'm going to close the lid, and we're going to let this guy go for about 3 hours here in the smoke so it can get some nice smoke flavor before we move on to the next step. We've been going about 3 hours with that chuck roast in the smoke, so now I'm about ready to move on to the next segment of this cook. So what we're going to do is move to the Dutch oven. I've got 1 red onion that I've cut up into slices that we're just going to use to line the bottom of my Dutch oven. And then we're going to bring over that chuck roast that's been in the smoke, and you can have a look at that and see how much nice color that guy's got on it. Let's get in a little closer there where you can see that. Yeah, it's just come up, it's beautiful there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to dump in a cup to a cup and a half of beef broth, and then we're going to put in a bottle of Guinness extra stout. And then I'm going to put in the marinade that I had left over from when we marinated this guy overnight. And from here, I'm going to put in some of my root vegetables that I've cut up. I've got some onions, some more red onion that I've quartered. I've got some carrots that I've peeled and sliced, and then it just wouldn't be complete without some potatoes in there as well. So let's take this guy back to the grill. Okay, I'm gonna crack the grill open, and I'm gonna set this Dutch oven on here uncovered for about 30 minutes or so, and I'm also gonna ramp the temp up. I'm going to use the Flame Boss to run the temp on up to about 275 for the remainder of this cook. We're going to go another 3 hours at least here, and maybe even 4. So I'm going to give that 30 minutes or so in the smoke, and then we'll come back and put the lid on the Dutch oven. We've been going another half an hour and giving that a little time to heat up there, so we're going to go ahead and put the lid back on this guy, and we're just going to let that braise and steam in there for probably 3 more hours. We've been going about 7 hours now, so I've been in the Dutch oven here for about 4 hours, and I'm getting real close to being ready. This thing is really nice and tender, but I'm going to let it go for a little while longer. And I just came out here a few minutes ago, and I pulled 2 cups of the braising liquid off of this that I'm going to make a pan sauce with to serve over the top of this. So we'll be back shortly. The next thing I'm going to do here is make a pan gravy out of some of the liquid I collected off of that braising liquid out there. So I'm inside at the stove, and I've got a pan warmed up, and I'm going to melt looks like about 2.5 tablespoons of butter in this pan. And then when I have the butter melted, I'm going to whisk in some flour, and I'm just going to kind of whisk it in slowly, and it's going to tighten up in this butter. It's just like, this is a roux. We're just making a simple roux here that we're going to use to thicken up that liquid that we collected from the Dutch oven. And once I have all that butter and flour incorporated, I'm just going to let this cook, and we're over medium-high heat here. Well, maybe closer to medium heat. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. I want to watch for this to start to change color. I want for that flour to start to brown a little bit and have a nutty aroma to it before we move on. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see it very well on the camera, but that's starting to change color. It's starting to take on a little bit of a brown characteristic, and you can definitely smell the aroma change. So what I'm going to do is drizzle in some liquid and whisk that as we go, because that's going to tighten up really quickly here. You can see how that just tightens up, and we just keep adding liquid. And you want to whisk this constantly. I'm going to add more. I'm looking for a specific consistency here of a gravy. You know, you can turn this into as thick or as thin of a gravy as you like. I've put about 1 cup of my sauce in there, or my liquid in there so far. I'm going to put a little more and just keep whisking that as we go. I'm going to put a little bit more in there, and I'm going to be right about where I want to be there. I think I've used about 1.5 cups so far, and when I get to the consistency I like, I'm just going to take it off the heat. But this is still continuing to thicken a little bit, so I'm going to give it just a little more liquid. I'm going to whisk that in. I'm turning the heat off, and I'm just going to set this aside until we're ready to use it. Okay, so I've taken my plate, I've cooked a little rice, I've put some of our vegetables on there that were graciously cooked with this roast, and I'm going to lay a piece of that right across the top there, and then we're going to drizzle that guy with a little bit of our pan gravy that we made. And my friends, dinner is served. This is going to be amazing. You're going to have to give this a try, and let me know what you think. Until next time, this is John Setzler with Atlanta Grill Company.